Greetings and salutations. I'm Drake Goneth, and this is an article I found on the New York Times called Pedophilia, a Disorder, Not a Crime. I'll be giving my discussion on its particular concept, basically my thoughts and opinions at the end of this. Rather read the whole thing out to you, let you hear the whole thing, then open my app about it. So let's dig into this. Camden NJ. Think back to your first childhood crush. Maybe it was a classmate or a friend next door, most likely through school and into adulthood. Your affections continued on focus on others in your approximate age group, but imagine if they did not. By some estimates, 1% of the male population continues long after puberty to find themselves attracted to pubescent children. These people are living with pedophilia, a sexual attraction to pubescents that often constitutes a mental illness. Unfortunately, our laws are failing them, and consequently ignoring the opportunities to prevent child abuse. The Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders defines pedophilia as an intense and recurrent sexual interest in prepubescents children, and a disorder if it causes a person marked distress or interpersonal difficulty, or if the person acts on his interests. Yet our laws ignore pedophilia until after the commission of a sexual offense, emphasizing punishment, not prevention. Part of this failure stems from the misconception that pedophilia is the same as child molestation. One can live with pedophilia and not act on it. Sites like Virtuous Pedophiles provide support for pedophiles who do not molest children and believe that sex with children is wrong. It is not that these individuals are inactive or non-practicing pedophiles, but rather that pedophilia is a status and not an act. In fact, research shows about half of all child molesters are not sexually attracted to their victims. A second misconception is that pedophilia is a choice. Recent research, while often limited to sex offenders, because of the stigma to pedophilia, suggests that the disorder may have a neurological origins. Pedophilia could result from a failure in the brain to identify which environmental stimuli should provoke a sexual response. MRIs of sex offenders with pedophilia show fewer of the neural pathways known as white matter in their brains. Men with pedophilia are 3 times more likely to be left-handed or ambidextrous, a finding that strongly suggests a neurological cause. Some findings also suggest that disturbances in the neurodevelopment in utero or early childhood increase the risk of pedophilia. Studies have also shown that men with pedophilia have on average lower scores on tests or visual spatial ability and verbal memory. The Virtuous Pedophiles website is full of testimonials of people who vow never to touch a child and yet live in terror they must hide their disorder from everyone they know, or risk losing educational and job opportunities, and face the prospect of harassment, even violence. Many feel isolated. Some contemplate suicide. The psychologist, Jess Baring, author of Perv, The Sexual Deviant in All of Us, writes that people with pedophilia aren't living their lives in the closet. They're eternally hunkered down in a panic room. While treatment cannot eliminate a pedophile's sexual interest, a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy and medication can help him to manage urges and avoid committing crimes. But the reason we don't know enough about effective treatment is because research has usually been limited to those who have committed crimes Our current law is inconsistent and irrational. For example, a federal law and 20 states allow courts to issue a civil order committing a sex offender, practically one with diagnosis of pedophilia, to a mental health facility immediately after the completion of his sentence, under standards that are much more lax than our ordinary civil commitment for people with mental illness. And yet, when it comes to the public policies that might help people with pedophilia to come forward and seek treatment before they offend, the law omits pedophilia from protection. The Americans with Disability Act of 1990 and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 prohibits discrimination against otherwise qualified individuals with mental disabilities. In areas such as employment, education, medical care, Congress, however, explicitly excluded pedophilia from protection under these two crucial laws. It's time to revisit these categorical exclusions. Without legal protection, a pedophile cannot risk seeking treatment or disclosing his status to anyone for support. He could lose his job and future job prospects if he is seen at a group therapy session, asks for a reasonable accommodation to take medication to see a psychiatrist, or request a limit in his interaction with children. Isolating individuals from appropriate employment and treatment only increase their risk of committing a crime. There's no question that the existence of civil rights protections to people with pedophilia must be weighed against the health, safety needs of others, especially kids. It stands to reason that a pedophile should not be hired as a grade school teacher, but both the ADA and Rehabilitation Act contain exceptions for people who are not otherwise qualified for a job or who pose a direct threat to the health and safety of others that can't be eliminated by a reasonable accommodation. This is why employers don't have to hire blind bus drivers or mentally unstable security guards. The direct threat analysis rejects the idea that employers can rely on generalizations that must assess the specific case and rely on evidence, not presumptions. Those who worry that employers would be compelled to hire dangerous pedophiles should look to Hive case law, where for years courts were highly conservative, erring on the side of finding a direct threat even into the late 1990s, when medical authorities were in agreement that people with Hive could work safely in, for example, food services. Removing the pedophile exclusion would not undermine criminal justice or its role in responding to child abuse. It would not make it easier, for example, for someone accused of child molestation to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. A pedophile should be held responsible for his conduct, but not for the underlying attraction. Arguing for the rights of scorned and misunderstood groups is never popular, particularly when they are associated with real harm. But the fact that pedophilia is despised is precisely why our response to it in criminal justice and mental health have been so inconsistent and counterproductive. Acknowledging that pedophiles have a mental disorder and removing the obstacles to their coming forward and seeking help is not only the right thing to do, but it would also advance efforts to protect children from harm. And that was the article. It's a little hard for me to read because, I'll be honest, some words are a little advanced for me. I do have issues with reading languages a little bit, even my own. But this one's one of those where read it once, read it twice, read it 3 times, and you get the same result in some minds. This guy's literally trying to open the mental health regards to pedophilia and saying that it's a mental disorder. I'll give him that. It probably is. But I don't think it's one of those cases where I literally go through this, stare at it, pound my head into a wall, then stop for a second, realizing there are some sensible notes in it, and then there's some where I go, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? Of course, to making this open to the mental disorder thing, people would obviously scream to the heavens about being, insane and not able to control their actions. It's like one of the first things they will do. And then, if I understood this right, opening jobs up for them, there are some jobs where having little to no interaction for them is a good idea, but I'd rather not know who actually is mentally considered a pedophile. There are moments when you read this and you just, I feel it's as justified as it is now. Really shouldn't be doing this. Really shouldn't be advocating for their rights. Because this is about the same as just trying to advocate to married children. I mean, what the fuck? I mean, straight up. We are looking at an article that is quite literally would help offenders offend. And then it has this link to this virtuous pedophiles that, wow. Wow. Yeah. Apparently, when you go to it, it automatically does a search on your browser. And it actually has a link. I will put both the link to the article and the link to the Virtuous Pedophiles website. I mean, I'll leave links to these items and such, but honestly, I'm a little on the disturbed side at reading this. It always bothers me. When I first read it, it pissed me off. It just came off as something someone was trying to make it easier for pedophiles to offend and trying to make it easier for them to just come out and attack children, get jobs able to have easier access to children. If I misunderstand this, then you're more than welcome to call me out on it. Because like I said, there are certain words here that I just don't understand. And I try to understand every day. I try to look up the new definitions so I make sure I'm getting the right point of view. But just from what he was saying, he was basically trying to just justify pedophiles. He was trying to make it sure there was a difference between pedophiles and child molesters. Which there's not. There really isn't. It may not be a sexual attraction to it, but there's still an addiction for the power. Raping someone, child molestation offers a source of power. Pedophiles are just worse because they're sicker, because they want to have that power over someone and have the gratification of that, yeah. And then molesters just want the power. And it's a sad thing, it really is. And if this was something that we were talking about on age group based, then people who have molested who are under a certain age group should get help. because there's still hope. Their mind is still developing. You can still mentally help them. But an adult male, the odds of changing their personality more than it already has is not likely. You're kind of fucked there. Once your mind gets to a certain state, changing your mental habits, changing your mental state is not easy. It's almost impossible for an adult after a certain age point. And this guy just tries to justify it. He really does. And it's really sick how he is trying to basically advocate for their rights and try to make them feel better about themselves. But that's my thoughts on it. That's my opinion on the matter. And if you disagree, then you disagree. If you agree, agree. But I'll have a link in the description to the article itself. It has a link to the websites and to the psychiatrist. So I'll more than likely add a link to the other website I mentioned. But I mean, it's just something to think about and see just how messed up the world is. Well, till next time.